Welcome back. And now for part 2.
And I was telling people I'm going to direct Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And people were like, what? Some people remembered, oh, yeah, it was a movie, but the movie didn't do very well. And then, of course, when I met Joss and he talked about it, that no, it hadn't. And he was not really that happy with the way it turned out. He wanted to tell that story, but he wanted to do it himself and do it the way he thought it should be done. So I got the gig. Now, it was the first episode, but it was not a pilot.
No, because there was an unaired pilot that had been shot.
Right. And it was just a 20-minute presentation that Joss had done himself. And there was a different actress playing Willow. Because of that, when I stepped in to direct episode 1, it wasn't considered a pilot. On the other hand, it functionally was a pilot.
Yes.
Because the sets had never been shot before. They'd never been lit. The look of the show hadn't been created. Some of the actors, like Allison, had never, they weren't in it. Things. So although it wasn't a pilot, I felt like I was directing a pilot.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was the prep like? What were you told ahead of time? How much time did you have to get sort of into the world?
It was a pretty good length of prep, as I remember. And it seemed to go pretty well. And Joss and David knew what they were doing. They had a real good sense of what the show would be and should be. When it came to things like casting the recurring roles and stuff, I didn't have any part in that because it was their show. And a director on those things is somewhat a hired gun. But I thought the prep was good. One of the biggest issues was that it was a 7-day shooting schedule.
Oh, that's wild, because we ended up, when I came in, it became 8 days. So in the beginning, I think it wasn't yet 8 days, but the scripts were so dense.
So dense. They were dense, and they had visual effects.
And action sequences.
Yeah. Makeup effects, which take forever. Action. So we had 7 days. And the first AD and I, working on the board and setting it all up, I think you can do this in 7 days. This should be an 8-day show because of the complexity involved, all the things we just said. And they were adamant. They said, no, we only have 7 days. We've got to do it in 7 days. And the first AD and I, we felt pretty firmly that it's going to be really, can't do this in 7 days, especially the first one, because it's never been done before. Sets like,
you're not in a groove yet with any of the departments either.
Like the Bronze, which was a beautiful set, had never been shot. It hadn't been lit. It was a little bit of pre-lighting, but nobody knew how to shoot it. We were inventing how to shoot the sets that hadn't been done before, and that takes time. Usually that stuff is worked out on a pilot, which typically for a show like this would be a 10-day shoot. Then you would have time to go on the sets and work it out and work out the details of the makeup and the look of things like, if you're going to be cutting to hell, what does it look like? All of that stuff, which we didn't have. And the shoot was tough. The shoot was really tough.
The first episode does really distinctly establish the world visually, tonally, the camera work, like all of the aspects of it. How did you get that? It sounds like within 7 days, but how did that happen? How did you do that magic?
I just, you do your homework and you think about it and you figure out, how am I going to do this and how am I going to give it a look? And I think Trick or Treat had been a really good experience for me. I'd learned a lot shooting that. Bob Elswit was the cinematographer on that. Great Robert Elswit. And I remember how we did some of that stuff, which had some of a similar kind of feel to it. And I'm not particularly enamored of shooting close-ups, maybe a little tighter than you normally would. Get a close-up, more like a feature film where you'd come in a little tighter. And that's why I did the close-ups that way. And I remember when we got to the cutting room, looking at it and thinking, I don't know if that was a good idea. But, I was trying it out. And then I realized from watching later episodes of Buffy that they kept that look all the way through. And I'm looking back thinking, well, I'm not sure. If I had it to do over again, I'm not sure I'd do it.
I love that because it actually brings you so closely into the characters and we're meeting them for the first time. So your intuition was leading you into something.
Yeah, you just go by intuition. You really do. And again, I wanted to make it feel like these were It's important that these be real kids living a real life, drawing even on, the high school, what we did in American Graffiti, what that was like. And I wanted to try to get some of that feeling in. I wanted some of the group conversation scenes to be a little sloppy, not exactly like George Lucas did them, but to get that, just feel like you're really in a high school. And on the Steadicam shots, those were fun. I got to do a couple of those. However, we had a terrible time with the schedule. We're doing the best we can here. Anyway, I went a half a day over.
Which is nothing. I mean, considering, yeah.
Well, it ended up to be 7.5 days.
The thing that you're talking about also in terms of the realism that was so important to strike, I feel like it's critical to strike it on a show that's using supernatural forces. Like, you have to have that grounded reality so that you will go on the journey with the rest of the lore that's around it. That's really, really important.
Absolutely. It's that grounding of the supernatural stuff. You have to do that. Again, I think I did that on Trick or Treat too. I had the same idea. I tried to do that on Buffy the best that I could. Now, I think the other thing about Buffy was I was working with actors who really had very little experience. Well, Sarah didn't. She was an old pro.
Sarah and Allison had been kid actors, but a lot of the actors, it was their first time ever on a set, for sure.
Italy, playing Santa. He had never really done anything. And David playing Angel. He had his first scene, I think, ever by episode. And I remember him coming to set, and I just thought, this kid is terrifying. Like, he doesn't.
Did you have any rehearsal other than camera rehearsals? Did you have any time with the actors to rehearse and sort of flesh things out, or none?
We might have had a table reading kind of thing.
Or you?
Can't remember. I don't remember. We might have with just the leads. But I do remember David being just not really knowing what to do. And I bumped into him many years later at one of those Hollywood parties, and he thanked me for getting him through that first day. He was really sweet about it. He said, I really did not know what I was doing. But thanks, Charlie. And I said, well, you want to help a young actor. I was a young actor myself who didn't know what I was doing. So, you want to help those people. But then the other side, the flip side is selfishly, I'm a director. I got to get through the day. I got to get this actor.
Right.
I got to get this actor through the scene and get him to give the best performance he possibly can.
And for you, with your own directing, what was your mission statement to yourself going into this job? Did you have a sort of goal or something that you wanted to achieve and were looking for creatively?
I really wanted it to be plausible. And I wanted the characters and what they were going through to be honest and real. And then you can have all the monsters and demons and stuff that you want, but ground it in the reality of teenagers. So these kids have to really be going through that. When Buffy's got her scenes with her mother, these have to feel like a real scene between a teenage girl and her mom. And don't play anything campy about it. Play it all for truth.
And how was it directing Sarah? How was it working with Sarah and with Allison?
A dream. Just that. Sarah's she's great. She was such a pro. She knew exactly what. Allison seemed to me a little more insecure. And I felt like she needed a little bit more working with.
Well, Sarah, it's also her character. Her character is also that, character. Right?
Yeah. But then she would do things. She'd have these lines that she could make work in a way that I don't know any actor that would have made that choice. And it's brilliant. She looks so appealing and quirky and odd that you just almost kind of stand back and let her go. There's a long scene at the Bronze where she and Sarah are talking back and forth. It's got to be 2-page, 3-page scene.
Yeah, dialogue. Which is big for television. For our listeners that don't know, that's a long scene for a television scene.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing that Joss did all over that, I don't know if he ever started doing differently, but he would write dialogue that would go on for pages with no blocking, no idea of staging, no anything. So it was up to me to figure out how to stage it because he'd just give the dialogue. There'd be no business or anything. So I'd have to, give them some kind of business.
And did the actors bring some of that themselves as well, or were you pretty much blocking in that first episode?
It depends on who you're talking about. Sarah would bring her own stuff. And Anthony, who played Giles, he's a total pro. and he'd do all that kind of stuff. But then the other younger actors, they really wouldn't know. So I would try to come up with things. But like I had this long 3-page scene between Sarah and Willow, and I didn't have much time either. So I just sat them at this counter or bar together and just shot it kind of 2 ways, let them talk. I thought, I don't know if this is going to hold, but I think it is because of how interesting the two of them were. And they didn't know each other. So they hadn't really developed the chemistry that I think that they even developed better and better as the show went along.
But that's funny because you, out of time or whatever, maybe just did the 2 angles. But what actually is really good about that is it gives us time as the audience. I mean, I later was on the show, so I wasn't the audience, but it gives the audience the time to get to know these characters without being distracted by, too much happening with the camera. You're really just getting inside what is the relationship? What are we planting? What's going to grow from here?
The other thing was that the dialogue was so good. The dialogue was so smart and clever and actable that I thought, okay, we'll just let them act it. Okay, the other thought in the back of my mind, because as a director, you have to think of these things, was if we want to get in there in the editing room and take the middle of this scene out, we can. If they get up and start walking around the room, you can.
Right, the cuts.
You can lift people out. How are you going to cut? Yeah, how are you going to, yeah. So it was all to the good. And, but it particularly worked, I thought, because Allison was so charming and quirky, good with that stuff. They were both, but Sarah was a pro. They couldn't have done the show without somebody like her at the center of it, somebody that experienced and talented.
She'd been working, I think, literally since she was 2. I loved working with Michael Gershman, the DP, as well. How was that collaboration for you?
It was good. Michael was good. I thought he lit it well. Again, it was the first episode, so it was the pilot. He was lighting these sets for the first time, and he was being a little careful, and he wanted it to really look good, but 7 days.
Yeah, he really had a filmic sensibility, especially with the sort of vampire world and that sort of darker world with the master. And for you, had you worked a lot with prosthetics, either as an actor or a director, because you alluded to the fact of it taking time, obviously, for the process of doing the makeup and stuff, but that's also something in terms of how it's lit for it to be effective and all of those things. Had you done a lot of work with prosthetics prior?
No, I hadn't done a lot. We had some on Space Above and Beyond. But the main one was Trick or Treat, certainly did, because, the bad guy was a heavy metal rock and roll monster from the dead who was electrical. So not only was he had makeup effects, but he had visual effects and the blue, things zapping out of him. And we had a lot of those kind of effects on that. And that had really been my first experience with it.
What was it like shooting at the practical Torrance High School for Sunnydale High when classes were going on?
I know, right? That was crazy. More of a problem for production than it was for me exactly, because we just had to work around it. But it seems like we would get areas of the school they could keep people out of and we could shoot. We managed to do it. We managed to work around it, but it wasn't the easiest thing. It's expensive to try to shut down a school.
And it is visually such a great school. It's been used in so many other things as well.
And, and we had the interiors built. We had
yes.
We had 2 or 3 of the hallways and offices and the library and everything built. So those were on stage, which made it easier to do.
What would be your favorite scene that you shot if you had to pick one?
Well, I haven't thought about that and thought about it long now. The opening scene, I think, would have to be, I had this idea of a long steady cam shot going into the classroom with all the bones and the stuff, tracking along the window. Tracking along the window until bang, a fist comes through the window and the kids are breaking in. It's like just about the first shot. That was fun. It's fun, again, it's the Brian De Palma school, right? You cook up this really interesting little camera shot and you'll work it out. And then when you see that it actually works, that was really rewarding. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a great shot to lead you in to the show. And also then it sets up like how the show subverts expectations with the Darla character being the predator and all of that stuff. And so
that's right. And and I like doing that shot with, she turns around and you see the thing. Whoa, you weren't expecting that. Yeah. really a cool way to set it up. And I wanted to do it, the classroom with all the bones and everything, just to get that sense of, the bones and death and all that. And the shock cut of the hand coming through the window. It's to, again, like you say, draw the audience in right away.
What did you learn from the shoot besides the fact that it needed 8 days? What did you learn for yourself as a director while you were working on Buffy?
Oh, you learn something on all of them. The experience with Angel, with David, taught me a lot because it reminded me again that it's not just kid actors. An adult who's not used to it, they need a director. They need an outside eye, and they need more than that. They need some. I worked on a film once where the director was a writer, and he hadn't really directed. And he sat with all of the actors and he was saying, I feel that my job as a director is as an audience. I'm watching what you do. And my job is to sort of be the audience for you. And the other actors and I looked at each other and I thought, well, we're dead. I don't need an
We're
audience.
not going to get anything from him, right? Like we're not going to
I
get
don't
nothing.
want an audience. I want a director. I want somebody. I don't want a spectator. I need someone who's going to help
shape this with a vision. Have a vision.
Right. Yes, director. It doesn't mean that you're a dictator, but you want somebody with a vision.
It is an active word, director, as opposed to audience.
Yeah, I get what the guy was saying, but I'm thinking, no, that's not what directing is. I had an opportunity to work with Ian McKellen, and the band played on. It was called wonderful movie, and I mean, there's me getting to work with this great Shakespearean actor, my dream. I remember him saying to Roger Spottiswoode, who was the director, saying, tell me, I need direction. I need direction. I need direction. Thinking, you're bloody Ian McKellen. How much direction do you need? But he needs it. He wanted it. The greatest actors, they need to be directed, I think I came out of Buffy with that.
I wish we'd gotten to work together on Buffy.
I know. I wish we had.
So much fun.
I wish we had too. And I look back on that with with mixed feelings and regrets that I left the show after just doing the first one. But we were developing this kids movie about this boy and a dog. Air Bud. It was a dog who played basketball.
Which you directed the same year as Buffy. You ended up doing as you directed the first episode.
I literally directed them one after the other. I had been developing Air Bud for a while. It was another case like I later did with Dolphin Tale, where I had to kind of come in, and I didn't do the writing myself, but I worked with the writers on Air Bud, and we completely changed the script and kind of did the way I wanted to do it. An honest, genuine story about a dog and a boy. And the dog does a trick, but he's a trick dog, but he's still just a dog. So I ended up doing that. While we were shooting the first Buffy, I got the word that the financing had all fallen together and Air Bud got a green light. So I literally left after delivering my cut of Buffy and went right into prep on Air Bud. And so that was it. That was my one and only Buffy.
And did you keep any journals or notes from Buffy, or had you stopped doing that at that point?
I kept some notes. I've got my script, I'm sure, somewhere with all my director's notes in it. I'm sure I have that.
Oh, that would be so cool. I want some pictures of that. I want to see that. That sounds amazing.
I've kept stuff for years in my storage, and I really do need to go dig through that storage. I did a little bit of it not long ago because I am kind of considering myself retired or semi-retired. I just kind of, I've done this long enough. Let me see if I can find that Buffy script. It's got to be out there somewhere.
That would be amazing. I can't tell you how much the Buffy fans would love to see. I mean, it's got such an unbelievable, avid fan base. Why do you think that Buffy has such legs with the audience?
It just really is a brilliant idea. And the way Joss did it, using it as a metaphor for the teenage experience, that speaks to everybody. And I think that's why. And I think they speak to people for the very same reason, that like any good drama, any theater, or I suppose book, speaks to people because they can see themselves in it. They see that play and they say, yeah, I know exactly what that character's going through. Oh, I've felt that way too. I mean, it is that basic connection that we all have with the theater or a movie or a TV show. And Joss captured it really well on Buffy. I certainly was grateful to be able to be the first one to put that TV thing on screen.
Besides the opening scene, was there another sequence where you felt like everything really clicked and had a sort of fluid way of unfolding and worked out, or worked out even better than you were hoping it would? Was there anything else in the show that you can think of?
I remember doing some scene in the alleyway with Angel, which was kind of cool, and shooting that and wanting to make that feel like they're trapped and they're in this corridor and so on. And I remember insisting that they get up. I needed some E-fans out there to blow some leaves through this. I don't want to. Can we? And then I'm like, more leaves, more leaves. Just it's got to feel like that, like a Twilight Zone episode. I kept looking back at how much I loved the old original black and white Twilight Zones, which did the same thing, by the way. Real people having real problems and going through genuine things, but in a backdrop of a supernatural story.
Absolutely.
Pretty much what Buffy was capturing.
The central metaphor, as you've been talking about, high school as hell, was that something that you related to, whether it was high school or a different time in school where you had that kind of experience?
Sure. I mean, not specifically, but I remember what it's like to be a teenager and growing up and what high school is like. And I remember the hellish moments of it. And again, hearkening back to American Graffiti, where that's what George was doing in that movie, and that's what Joss was doing in Buffy. And I felt like, these are guys who are really capturing that nightmare, the highs and lows and everything of high school. So yeah, I was very aware of that and trying to make sure that I got that. And again, honest performances. That to me, and shooting it in a way that was real. Don't play into the supernatural of it. They're real kids having real problems, and get to the reality of that. And then all the supernatural and the visual effects and the vampires and all the stuff. That'll take care of itself. That's in there. But get the heart of the truth of, high school is hell.
I played Drusilla, the vampire character, and I didn't flesh out the vampire elements. I was about finding the stuff that's dimensional and relates to the human condition for all of us, So instead of thinking about it as a supernatural being one way or the other, really.
That's exactly the right way to look at it. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I would have enjoyed directing you. We would have,
I know. I know.
Sat around and laughed. It wouldn't have had to work too hard.
Is there a high point of your own high school experience that you remember and can share?
Oh, there's so many. High school is all highs and lows. I certainly remember a lot of them. Some of the friends that you make and the experiences that you have. Growing up in the San Fernando Valley, my buddies and I, we'd drive up to Chatsworth and hike around the rocks up there and talk about the meaning of life and, read Stranger in a Strange Land and, do all these things, exploring, sitting on the lawn outside of the multipurpose room where you're putting up the school play and everybody playing guitars and singing Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen songs. It's a magical time.
Yeah, you painted that so well. I feel like I was there.
It feels like yesterday sometimes.
If you were to say a high school low, what was a high school low experience that you had?
Oh, so many of those too, but they're all emotional, that, that crazy, mad person you're in love with that moves away or, or whatever, or you see her, she's off with another guy. You think, I will never survive this. How can I go on living,
It's so dramatic, right? So
exactly.
Yeah.
It's bad enough to be just a teenager, but then to be one who's an actor and into drama anyway, it's just, and the highs, and then somebody saying, hey, an agent came to see you playing Sancho Panza and wants to sign you to a contract. And then, then the flip side was my father telling me, don't do it. I don't think it's a good idea. He said it's because he'd been in Hollywood all those years.
Right.
A lot of actors, and they basically, they're unemployed. They're on the unemployment line, and they might get a part now and again, and then they're not working. And he said, Charlie, you're smart. There's so many things you could do. You don't want to be an actor.
Did he come around at a certain point when he saw you were working and loving what you were doing? Or did he always feel like, I don't know about this?
Yeah, he did. He finally said, oh, wow, it was pretty good. But I always have that voice in the back of my mind, having something to fall back on, He always said, because he knew it. He understood the business. And it's a tough business. I feel like I've managed to make it all the way through, but mostly unscathed.
Have you ever felt like an outsider trying to fit in at any point in your life?
Always. Oh yeah, always. I think it was hard for me as a kid coming back from France, speaking French and trying to go to school in the valley, and they were going to play dodgeball. I've never heard of dodgeball. What is that? I
I
don't know.
think dodgeball is so cruel. I
I
think it's
think it
a
is too.
terrible.
I remember thinking
Yeah,
at the time, it said,
I
"Hey,
just don't understand. I never played dodgeball, but I think it's a horrific idea to throw a ball as hard as you can at
hit
the
somebody,
other. I
hit
mean,
as many people as you can, as hard as you can."
terrible.
I remember thinking, well, they wouldn't have done this in Paris.
No, it's like a medieval torture sport or
It's the
something.
torture thing. But I was also always younger than the other kids in my class. And I was always shorter. So I often felt socially awkward. And I always had friends. It wasn't too bad, but no, I definitely had those kind of low points. It's funny, once I started working professionally and I was playing 16-year-old kids when I was 18 or 19, and I was playing 14 and 15-year-old kids. Finally, being young and looking young and being short kind of paid off finally. It's,
Right, all those things that had caused you some Sturm und Drang
yeah,
younger. You're
exactly.
like, this is actually really good for me.
That's right. This is actually good for me. All my buddies who are just as good as I am, but they're 19 and they look 19,
Mm-hmm.
their roles are being played by a 27-year-old kid who looks 19.
Right. Sarah's character ends up developing her posse and finding her group of friends. Who was your posse in high school? It sounds like the theater and music group. And then who's your posse now?
The drama kids, and I knew the drama kids at the other high schools better than I knew kids in my own high school who were not in the drama department. I knew the kids at Hollywood High in Birmingham, and I knew the kids at Taft, and I knew, at Van Nuys High School. There's a real camaraderie in the LA high schools among acting students. I think there still is among drama kids. And I think that will be a lot of those kind of people are still my friends. I don't really hang around much with people in the film business, although there are some people that I have lifelong friendships with. But a lot of my lifelong friendships go back to when I was really young, really just a little kid. And, some people from high school too, college.
Which is great, right? Because you've gone through so much together through the journey of life together.
Absolutely. One of my best buddies in college is going to be here in a couple of weeks. He's going to stay for a while and kind of, Sahara in the desert. He became the head of the arts department for the Pennsylvania state government.
Nice.
Yeah, he's an arts administrator. Yeah, so we've all done different things. A buddy of mine became a set designer, and a bunch of them did become actors, people that I was at school with, and others went on to other things. One of my closest friends from there took up Balinese gamelan music and became a professor of gamelan. I think she's teaching at Columbia University now, and an ethnic music specialist. And she wrote a concert piece with Ravi Shankar. And there were a lot of interesting kids growing up in the San Fernando Valley when I was. It was an interesting time. The San Fernando Valley was an explosion of interesting
Yeah, it
kids.
sounds like a bevy of creativity too.
And all brought about by, the Vietnam War and those movements. And we were all shaped by, the assassinations of Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther. And the art, there was a flowering explosion of art in those days, theater, back to David Mamet and all that stuff. That, and then all the interesting films that started to be made. How many times did I sit and watch The Graduate?
Well, you were coming of age into being a performer and an actor at the time when it was really also like character-driven movies and television. Everything was so much because of the climate that you're talking about.
Absolutely right. It really was. And the studios didn't quite know what movies to make anymore around the period there where they weren't sure. They didn't trust themselves because the old model of whatever they'd been doing in the 50s wasn't really working. Then there were all these young maverick filmmakers that wanted to do things differently, and the studios just kind of let them because they didn't know what to say. So you had George Lucas and Spielberg and Coppola and all these guys.
It was the same thing with the music business at that time. I remember hearing a story about an agent who had both Pat Boone and then some like grassroots hippie, I forget which musician it was, but basically was like, I don't really know, but these seem kind of interesting on both ends of
Pat
the
Boone
spectrum.
here, I've got Iron Butterfly here.
Yeah, yes.
Vanilla Fudge. And
But that makes for really good art and music and movies and,
that was true.
literature.
And really, the record companies didn't know. They didn't know what would sell. They didn't have a formula that they felt would work. So all these bands come and they could play on the Sunset Strip, and you'd have, Buffalo Springfield and the Byrds, and you'd have all these different people playing that nobody knew what to make of it. This is Neil Young guy, what is, and then suddenly, oh, well, that's a good song. Oh, and there's another good song. Oh, and Jim Morrison and the Doors. Oh, yeah, they're good. All these kids just doing whatever they wanted to do, whatever they felt. And the blossoming of creativity in the 60s has really been unmatched for a long time.
So what else is a big part of your life these days?
Oh my gosh. I'm just kind of taking it easy. I've enjoyed talking about all this stuff with you guys too, because it helps jog my memory too. And I am starting to write all that, but I love to travel.
Where have you traveled recently that you've liked going to?
I love travel in general, and I'm back in France whenever I can be, and I'm often up in Canada, and I was up at, I don't know if you know Whistler up above Vancouver.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Resort, spent last December up there.
Lovely.
Nice film festival. They gave me a little.
I saw that. A lifetime achievement, right?
Lifetime, yeah, something like that. Lifetime achievement, career achievement, yeah. Now, if you get old enough and they hang around and you're still working, they get these things. It's sweet. It was really sweet of them. And, so much of what I have done is in Canada. I really consider myself a filmmaker as much as an American.
So is there anything that we haven't asked you that you would like to talk about or that you would like to share?
I think you guys have asked me so much. Like I said in my note to you, you guys know more about me than I do. I can't think of anything that I could possibly add.
Oh, it's been so incredible spending time with you, hearing your stories, and thank you so much for sharing so much of yourself and your time, and also giving us the most in-depth interview with you about Buffy and your extraordinary life and your stellar, impressive, unbelievable career, and it's just been an absolute joy.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure. It's a joy. And it's a joy to talk to people who understand the film business and understand
the craziness that we're all in.
The craziness we're all in, and understand the art and the acting and the craziness of the business.
The weird gypsy life we've chosen.
I know, right? What the hell were we thinking?
Maybe we weren't thinking.
Maybe my dad was right. I should have been an architect.
Yeah, but I guess none of us really were cut out for a 9-to-5, right? We just weren't.
We're just not. I can't imagine going into an office every day. I couldn't imagine it. And touch wood, it looks like I'm going to escape it.
It was such a pleasure to talk with Charlie. We haven't had the opportunity to work together prior, and now I consider him a friend. Thank you, Charlie, for your time, for sharing such wonderful stories from your life and illustrious career. Re-Vamped. If you'd like to hear 35 minutes of additional interview covering everything from acting in Starman to working with Peter O'Toole to behind the scenes on The Untouchables, Charlie's brilliant directing of Snowwalker and Stone of Destiny, which he shot partly in Westminster Abbey, and so much more, please visit our Patreon page. We will see you next week when we'll do it again. Until next time, rewatch, revamp, reinvent, and be remarkable you.